Hello, hello, hello. It's me again, the snarky juror. I've got a new thing for you to contemplate. I'm going to do it a little bit different. I'm not going to tell you much about it. I'm going to just go ahead and go to the opening statements. And when they get done, I'll pause it and maybe we'll share a few things. Or maybe not. So, let me see if I can do this correctly. Okay. Now, I had watched some of this, not very far, and Court TV was having a lot of glitches. So I'm going off a long crime for today. So let us start here. The judge just gave instructions to the jury and is handing it off to the state to start. Okay. It'll take me a minute or two to get back in the flow of things.
This case is about a woman who very early on in her pregnancy decided she wanted to be a single mother. And she did not want the father of this child to have any visitation, her husband. And everything she did from that point on was to attain that goal. And she would stop at nothing to attain that goal. She tried several things in the system that you'll hear. The courts, law enforcement, Department of Children and Families, no one got on her side. And at the end, when there was no other option, she shoots him and kills him and claims self-defense. Now, this couple, Doug Benefield and Ashley Benefield, were married. They had moved to Florida from South Carolina. They lived together in South Carolina. Now, when they lived down here in Florida, in Bradenton, they did not live together. Obviously, there were issues. Doug Benefield lived in his own apartment. Ashley Benefield lived with her mother, Alicia Byers, in a home with their daughter once she gave birth. She had this daughter who at the time was a toddler when she shot Doug. While they were living separate, they were still interacting with each other with the apparent goal of seeking reconciliation, reconciling this family and becoming a family. They were going to restaurants, they were going to Selby Gardens, they were hanging out at the pool at Doug Benefield's apartment complex. By all images, they looked like they were trying to reconcile. The problem was that is not what Ashley Benefield wanted. Although that's what she was portraying, that's not what she wanted. At the time that this shooting happened, they were planning to move to Maryland. Ashley's mother had inherited a home in Maryland, and they were going to move to Maryland. Doug was also going to move to Maryland. They were going to continue to live separate and continue to attempt to reconcile, but they were all going to move to Maryland together. Excuse me. At the time that this happened, everybody was in moving mode. There were boxes everywhere, furniture, beds upended. They had a U-Haul that they were using together. They had a pod that was in the defendant's driveway that they were putting all of their things into. And every day around this time, Doug Benefield was going to Ashley's home to assist her in putting these things into the pod, putting these things into the U-Haul, because the plan was that they were all going to pack up in the next few days and move to Maryland. And it continued to try and work on their relationship. The problem was Ashley Benefield knew that this was a ruse. She didn't intend to reconcile. She didn't intend to try to make this work. And the problem was there was a court hearing on September 30th of 2020. And at that court hearing, all of this was going to come out. It was going to come out that she was acting one way when she was by herself, and she was acting another way when she was with Doug Benefield. that she was telling him she wanted to work on things, that she wanted to get this marriage back together. But yet, when separate, she was saying she had absolutely no intention of reconciling, did not want him around, and did not want this to work. On the 30th of September, on the 27th of September, she shoots him and kills him. 3 days before this hearing and 3 days before this information was to become public. Now, there was no one else at the house at the time of the shooting. It was just Doug and Ashley. While Ashley's mother and child lived there, they had gone to the park. As soon as Doug got to the house, Alicia Byers takes her granddaughter and they go to the park. So the only people at the house are the defendant and the victim. And you're going to hear three very important things about this shooting. Number one, Ashley Benefield was the only person that was armed. It was her gun. She had it from before. It's not like she took it away from Doug. It was her gun. And Doug Benefield was not armed. He had no gun, no knife, no club, no weapon of any kind. Number two, Ashley Benefield was not injured. Law enforcement took pictures of her right after the shooting. And then again, you'll hear in a few days, they took more pictures. Because sometimes law enforcement, they know that bruises sometimes don't show up right away, that it takes several days for these bruises to show up. So they took pictures several days later. And you'll see those pictures and you'll see that Ashley Benefield is not injured. She has some very superficial scratches on her midsection. Who knows where they came from? She had cats in the house, but who knows? But this is the only injury to her. And the third thing is the trajectory of the fatal bullet. Now, he was shot multiple times, but one of the bullets was fatal. The trajectory of that bullet was side to side. It was not straight on. Doug Benefield was not facing her, coming at her at the time that the fatal shot was fired. Now, as you go through this trial, it's a lot of information, a lot of timeline, but it's all very important to understand the tenor of this relationship between these two people. And it goes all the way back to when they met, back in 2016. That was the end of August 2016, they meet. They were both involved in some political event and they met. 13 days later, they married. Doug Benefield was 54 years old. Ashley Benefield was 24 years old. So there was a 30-year age gap between the two of them. They knew each other 13 days and they got married. Ashley Benefield was very into the ballet, had been an ex-dancer. Her dream was to start a ballet company. And lo and behold, her husband has the money and the connections to get this done. So he begins and she begins to put this ballet company together. And they do put a ballet company together, but before it can actually take off, it falls apart. Before they're married even a whole year, so in April of 2017, Doug Benefield has his vasectomy reversed because they want a child. Within weeks or months of the vasectomy reversal, the defendant is pregnant. So all within a year of being married, they have done a vasectomy reversal, gotten pregnant, started a ballet, and the ballet has crumbled. While Ashley is pregnant, she's too sick from the pregnancy, morning sickness, and that she needs her mother to take care of her. Her mother's in Florida, in Bradenton, Florida. So during her pregnancy, she moves to Bradenton, Florida to live with her mother so her mother can take care of her during the sickness. The two never lived together again. This was the last time these two lived together. They continued a long distance relationship when she first moved to Florida, and continued trying to keep it together in communication. But about the same time as the ballet collapses, right about all of this time, Ashley Benefield starts complaints against the victim. Her complaints are things like, the main one was that Doug Benefield was poisoning her with heavy metals, and her unborn child was being poisoned, that there was poison in her tea, that he was giving her poison. There were also other complaints, domestic violence complaints, different types of complaints, but not once will you hear that she ever said he hit her. Not once did she ever say he choked her, kicked her, anything like that. Even though she's making these complaints, the victim, Doug Benefield, is still trying to make this work. And you're going to see some text messages and hear some things. He's still trying to make this work. But she is having none of it. So at about the time that she's ready to give birth, Doug Benefield contacts an attorney here in Florida, Sarasota, Florida, Stephanie Murphy, and asks her to help. And asks her to help him write a letter to her, to Ashley Benefield, to state that he wants to be a part of the birth and he wants to be a part of this child's life, and to please keep in contact with him. Ashley never answers that letter. That letter is sent via email on March 15th of 2018, which was several weeks early. She wasn't due yet. And the next day, she is induced, her pregnancy is induced, and she gives birth to a daughter. She never tells Doug. He doesn't even know his child is born for weeks. And she never responds to the letter. The way that Doug knows that this child is born is that Ashley Benefield starts filing complaints again. And based on these complaints, he figures out, oh, my child's born. And now we have more complaints. The complaints revolved around the poisoning and the things that I talked about earlier. And she filed for what's called a violation of injunction, or I'm sorry, she filed for an injunction. An injunction is our legal way of saying restraining order. So when someone wants a restraining order, they have to go through a process and go to court, and the court has to decide, and you get a restraining order. So that was her process. She was trying to get a restraining order against Doug, and the allegations were what I said to you. At the same time, Doug Benefield had not seen his child, had not met his child. So he did a cross complaint to say, please let me have contact with my child. I've never even met my child. So this was set for a hearing. And it ended up going 2 days. It was long. It was a long process, a lot of witnesses in family court. And it ended up going 2 days. It began in July 30th, 2018, and it finished on September 17th, 2018. And at the conclusion of that hearing, the judge said, no. No, you are not getting a restraining order, and no, you cannot keep this man away from his child. And granted Doug Benefield immediate visitation with his daughter. He met his daughter for the first time. She was 6 months old. And at the time when they were exchanging custody, which was at the sheriff's office for meeting the child, all of this animus had been going on. I mean, they had just had these hearings and all of this. And at that first time sharing, that's what they call it nowadays in family courts, time sharing. At the first time sharing, Ashley starts becoming very nice to Doug and says, basically, I'll go with you for the visitation. And that's what they do. The family goes off for visitation. And that begins approximately a year of basically them working on the relationship, going out to restaurants, doing things, hanging out together as a family. About a year. Now, Doug never moves in with Ashley. He keeps a separate residence. But after almost a year, so around August of 2019, Ashley just stops talking to him. Just stops. And that's about the time Doug files for divorce. He finally says, okay, we're getting a divorce. Then what you'll hear is that the defendant started a whole new set of complaints. You will hear that she was involved in 5 different complaints, all revolving not around her this time, but about the child. Because now Doug has visitation with the child. So now these allegations are that Doug's abusing the child. And the allegations are that Doug's abusing the child. What you'll hear is that not one of these charges was ever prosecuted. Not one of these charges ever left law enforcement. So the defendant now has tried these 5 complaints after Doug filed for a divorce. Law enforcement's not helping her. No one has said that Doug cannot see this child, so there's still visitation going on. And in this meeting of all these people, it was decided that Doug and Ashley Benefield will go for a psychological evaluation. So they do. And they go to Dr. Broder, and Dr. Broder does a very extensive psychological evaluation. And he meets with them together. He meets with them separately. He meets with them with the child, whose name is Emerson, by the way. She's a little girl. And at the time of the shooting, she was about not yet 2 years old. During this evaluation, and what you'll hear from Dr. Broder is that Ashley Benefield acted very different when she was with Doug and when she was not with Doug. When she was with Doug, it was, we're moving to Maryland, we're going to work on our relationship, we're going to try and make this family work. When she's not with Doug, she's saying, no way, no how, I do not want this, I don't want to reconcile with him. And to Doug's knowledge, all he's hearing is, I want to reconcile. So that's what he knows. That report was coming out at that hearing on September 30th, 2020. So September 30th, 2020, Ashley knew the ruse was up. Now, there had to be a request from both sides, the husband and the wife, to release this psychological report. And at one point before the hearing, Ashley Benefield tried to get Doug to drop that so the report would not get out, would not be released. Doug refused. So that report was coming out on the 30th, and on the 27th, she kills him and claims self-defense. Now, you're probably going to hear a lot of information about Doug Benefield. Probably some negative things, not so nice things. I would just ask you to remember who's saying them and why. Just because someone speaks words does not make it true. So use your common sense as you go through this trial. This is a long story with a lot of information, but you'll see that this was a custody battle that this mother was going to win at all costs. And the cost was the life of Doug Benefield. And that is murder. Thank you.
Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Judge Wright. May I request to put the screen down?
It's hard to keep my mouth shut, but I'm
This is the divide between generations. I'm in the old school. I'd like to know that I have a picture and it's reliable. This is the new world. We rely on technology. I'm not sure that I'm a fan.
That's not part of his opening statement. Not yet.
All right, here we go. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Douglas Benefield. He was 58 when Ashley Benefield was forced to shoot him. Can I see the second picture, please? I want you to note how he's built for a 58-year-old man. Now, despite being raised by a family who taught me that it was ill to speak about the dead in an unflattering sense, I'm going to have some strong words about Douglas Benefield, the alleged victim in this case. I say alleged victim because he was anything but that. The evidence is going to show that Douglas Benefield was a very disturbed man. Of that, I assure you, you'll have no doubt when the case is over. 30 years older than Ashley, he was obsessed with her, and he successfully portrayed himself as everything he was not in an effort to win her hand in marriage. Despite promoting himself as a religious, honorable, and decent human being, Doug Benefield was a manipulative, cunning, and abusive man who absolutely insisted on control. Among other things, you're going to learn during this trial that over the course of this 4-year relationship, Douglas Benefield did the following. He fired a handgun into the ceiling of their kitchen on an occasion to stop Ashley from talking. He threw a loaded gun at Ashley. He punched their dog in the face so hard that he knocked the dog unconscious. He regularly carried a concealed firearm that was racked, meaning pulled back and ready to fire. He unlawfully placed a tracker on Ashley Benefield's vehicle. He was regularly observed following Ashley Benefield in her car, driving in Manatee and Sarasota counties, despite the fact that he was living in South Carolina, having driven all the way just to tail her. He was caught by a neighbor at night, standing in the neighbor's backyard in an effort to peer into Ashley's house. He punched numerous holes in the drywall of their home when they lived together in South Carolina. And he had a previous marital history of domestic violence. Ashley Benefield was painfully aware of all of this on September 27th, 2020, the day of the homicide. And I want to assure you that this is not going to come to you from just one place. These are acts that were admitted by Douglas Benefield himself. Ashley Benefield feared him. That was no secret, ladies and gentlemen. She left him a letter when she moved out 3 years prior to the homicide, detailing how scared she was of him because of all of these acts. She feared for herself and for her unborn child. 3 years before the shooting. She left him. He pursued her. She rejected him. He would not take no for an answer. She at times despised him. He did not care. She moved to get away from him. He followed her. She decided to go to Maryland. Surprise. He decided to go to Maryland as well. She belonged to him. He had the right to be with her, and no less than God decided that to be the case. Doug Benefield viewed Ashley Benefield as his property. Abusers seek to control their victims, to dominate them.
Yep.
At times, the pressure that Doug Benefield exerted and brought to bear upon Ashley Benefield was so overwhelming that it sometimes triggered questionable suspicions in Ashley's dedicated effort to protect herself and her child. Domestic violence victims have several things in common.
Yeah.
Number one,
An argument, Judge?
Number one, they initially believe things will get better. Instead, they get worse. Number two, domestic violence victims develop a get along, go along attitude. It's the mentality because appeasement keeps the beast at bay. Just do what he wants and you'll be safe. These domestic violence victims constantly speak about walking on eggshells. And the reason they describe it like that is for fear of anything that they say may trigger a reprisal by the abuser. And if children are involved, everything is magnified. They become hyper-vigilant. Ashley Benefield developed all of those characteristics. So on 9/27/2020, the day of the homicide, Doug arrives at the residence of Ashley Benefield. And as you heard, they are living separately. He does not live there. He never resided there. This is at her home in Bradenton. He had no claim for entering that home on that day, except with the permission of Ashley, which she gave on that day because she was moving to Maryland and Doug was going to Maryland as well. But he knew, make no mistake, as the prosecutor has told you, Doug Benefield knew full well on that day that this relationship was over. They were not going to be living together. Maybe, hopefully, they could work out some type of co-parenting agreement, but she was done. So how does that day's events unfold? What happens that results in us all assembling here this morning? It starts, ladies and gentlemen, with Doug Benefield once again seeking control. He is simmering when he arrives at Ashley's home on that afternoon. Why is he simmering? He's on a slow boil, actually, because he knows that Ashley's moving. He knows that this relationship is over. And immediately there's a discussion about how they should pack the belongings, with Ashley taking the position that her belongings should be packed last. Why? because Ashley's things are going to be unloaded first. And Doug will then continue on to wherever it is that he was going to reside. So, this is the most vulnerable time for a domestic violence victim. When the abuser recognizes that he's about to lose her. So what's his response to this? All right, classic tactics of an abuser, they are threats and intimidation. On this afternoon, as the two of them are trying to pack this U-Haul in this pod. In an effort to avoid confrontation with him, Ashley says, after a short while, gee, you know, I'm really pretty exhausted. Why don't we stop for the day? We can finish tomorrow. Doug ignores it. His response is to grow increasingly aggressive and hostile. Not once, but twice, Doug body checks Ashley. And by body check, I mean he passes her in a hallway, slams his shoulder into her shoulder, almost knocking her over. That's not enough. The next thing is, as they're passing in a hallway, he's carrying a cardboard box. He jams the cardboard box into Ashley's side, which leaves scratches that the police photographer took. Again, now fearing for her safety because she sees how he is escalating in his behavior, she tries to persuade him, look, let's finish for the day. It's getting late. I'm tired. No go. Instead, Doug bellows, I know what you're doing. You're trying to get me to leave. I'm your husband, and I can spend the night if I want to. Well, that was enough for Ashley. She heads for the front door of the house to leave. Doug chases up to her, grabs her by the arm or hand, and spins her around so that his back is to the front door, blocking her from leaving. And he yells right in her face, where do you think you're going? Ashley, desperate at this point, Doug yells, you can't leave me. Ashley somehow finds the strength to summon up the nerve to say, I am done. You need to leave now. She commands him to leave the home. Terrified, while in his grasp, because he spun her around, his response is to smack her upside the head. And you'll see the pictures of her swollen face and her eye. And he yells, I am not done. Fearing for her life, as this was the first time that he had actually struck her. Up till then, it was always threats and intimidation. As intimidating as firing a gun may be to get you to stop speaking, he had never actually hit her. He'd pushed her. This time he struck her. Terrified after this, fearing for her life, she heads for her bedroom where she has a firearm. She gets to the firearm. She turns around. She orders Doug to stop. When she looks up, he's in the doorway. Instead of seeing the gun and leaving, Doug gets into this warrior pose with his arms moving purposely and advances. At that point, petrified, she fires, believing that if he gets a hold of her, she will be either seriously injured or killed. To her horror, after firing, he continues to advance. She absolutely panics. She tries to get away and backs to the side to create more distance between them, but there is no place left for her to go in this small bedroom. At that point, in utter panic, she keeps firing the gun. She sees Doug's legs go up in the air, almost as if he was running and slipped, and he falls backwards. Instinctively, she flees the house and heads next door to John Sant's house. He's a neighbor. When all is said and done, ladies and gentlemen, and the testimony and the evidence is complete, the only thing that's going to have been established here beyond a reasonable doubt is that Douglas Benefield was a violent abuser. Ashley Benefield's efforts to placate him was absolutely consistent with what abused women do, especially when a child is involved, and that Ashley's result and resource to deadly force was absolutely justified under the circumstances. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. There you have it. Opening statement. Prosecution puts forth their proposition of what happened. Defense just put forth theirs. So what's your conclusions? Granted, this is only opening statements. This isn't the whole trial. But both sides are telling you what they're going to put forth. This is what we believe, and this is what we're going to prove to you is accurate. Both sides. So from those both sides, are you leaning in any particular direction? Do you believe the prosecution that that poor man was a victim of this nefarious woman? Are you on the side of the victim, who, in my humble opinion, is a victim, the defendant? Everything she went through, saying one thing to this person, another thing directly to the accused. He's the accused. Is something else. She was trying to get away from him, but he would not leave her alone. And you do not, unless you are built as ripped as this guy was, you do not confront somebody unless you've got some kind of power behind you. Personally, I was offended by the prosecutor, Suzanne O'Donnell, how she was too sick from morning sickness, so she went home to mama. With my first child, I had morning sickness just about the entire time. And when you have morning sickness and you can't function, you need somebody to help. And yeah, you go home to mama because big rip dude isn't going to do anything. And I guess at the time he was on the road a lot, so he wasn't even there. She insinuated that Ashley had her labor induced because she got a letter from an attorney. This woman is out of her mind. Not Ashley, the prosecutor. She's out of her mind. I resented and was I resented and was offended by her tone the whole time she's telling the story. Couldn't see her face. Half the time I think she was sneering because it sure sounded like it. She wasn't putting forth facts. She was trying to prejudice the jury. I don't know if that's exactly what attorneys are supposed to do, but I was offended by her demeanor and how she presented the facts as she knew them, and portrayed Doug as the poor innocent victim. Sorry, my dentures are slipping. I'm curious to know what others think. Just hearing those two scenarios, what are you leaning? How did it hit you? Were you as offended as I was by the prosecution? Excuse me. Did you feel as justified as I did that her actions, Ashley's actions, were justified when you're dealing with somebody who's like that? So I will be interested to see how this plays out. I pray to God that any victim is protected and safe, that God keeps them safe. And I say it that way, should I be wrong in my conclusion. But I don't think I'm wrong. So we'll see. We'll see how this plays out. So let me go ahead and get it started up again.
All right, thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Judge, can we approach?
Yes. Are we done for this, for the presentation for now?
Yes.
Yes.
She looked a bit shaken up because I think she went down memory lane on that. But she was holding it in. Okay. Notice she has the headset. I guess everyone, including every jury member, can plug into the speaker system. I guess she has an advantage. I heard on another show that she's actually listening to. Yeah, the jury doesn't get to hear that. But the jury.
All right, state, call your first witness.
Tommy Benefield.
Hold on.
Tommy.
The jury has access to headphones if they're having trouble hearing, which is outstanding. They don't get to hear what's going on at the bench. But I think Ashley, when she put them on, she could hear what's going on up at the bench because it pertains to her. Not all courts do that, because this is the first time I've seen a defendant being able to do that. But then I'm not well versed, we'll put it that way. So, cousin of Doug is coming onto the stand.
Times where it may, if you want to feel free to do, please.
The judge was just letting the jury know at times there'll be
That's right. Morning, Judge.
At times, there'll be times when they'll be excused so that they can discuss something out of the hearing of them and not to give too much credence to it or something like that.
My name is Judge White. I'm going to be presiding over this case. As the deputy said, just make yourself comfortable in that chair. Get about 12 to 15 inches from that microphone. It adjusts up, down, left, right, however you need it. Speak in a loud, clear voice. We'll hear you.
Yes, sir, I will.
Good morning.
Good morning, Suzanne.
Please state your name.
Tommy Douglas Benefield.
Tommy Douglas. Oh, I hadn't noticed that before. Benefield. Benefield Jr.
Jr.
Can you spell those?
Yes, ma'am. Tommie. Middle name Douglas, Douglas. Last name Benefield, Benefield, and Jr.
And what was your relationship to Doug Benefield?
I'm Doug's first cousin.
Okay. How close were you and Doug?
Doug and I were completely attached, connected all the way through his adult life at varying times from daily to semi-annually, certainly quarterly, though the whole entire adult life.
Okay. And how are you employed?
I'm currently employed by a major airline out of Atlanta, Georgia, and I run a flight school or a portion of a flight school in Vero Beach, Florida, 3 days a week. It's a full-time job.
Okay. And were you and Doug close about flying?
Yes, ma'am. He followed me into the Navy. I was a Navy pilot off aircraft carriers, and Doug stayed with me in the months prior to him going into the Navy. He went through aviation officer candidate school, went through flight school, and then flew for 3 years and 2 deployments off aircraft carriers like I did. Same aircraft carrier, USS Nimitz, as a matter of fact.
Okay. How old was Doug Benefield when he died?
All right. He was 5 years younger than me. I'm 68 now. That was 4 years ago. 64. He was 59, I believe.
About how tall was Doug?
5'9", 5'10" at the most.
Approximately how much did he weigh at the time?
My guess is 160, 165. He was slender and fairly small for a man.
Okay. And before Doug moved to Florida, where did he live?
Before he moved.
Before he moved down here to Bradenton, Florida, where did he live?
Okay,
before
I'm
that?
sorry. I had to pick a year at that point. I'm sorry. He had a home all the way up until his death in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, just north of Charleston. 701 Preservation Place was the address.
Okay. And he lived at that address before moving to Bradenton, Florida, correct?
Yes, ma'am. And then he rented the house out when he moved to Bradenton for visitation of their daughter.
Okay. And before he met Ashley, who did he live with at the house?
The house for multiple years was Doug, his longtime wife Renee, and their daughter Eva. That's prior to Renee's death in 2015, December of 2015.
Yeah, I wonder about that.
So Renee died in 2015. Do you know how she died?
Yes, ma'am. She died of a undiagnosed heart ailment, cardiac arrest.
Okay. Is
Face down in the
That's
bed.
not qualified.
Lack of qualifications,
Yes.
overruled on that basis.
was Renee Eva Benefield's mother?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I'm sorry, can you say that date again? Was 2015 that she died?
I believe it's December 2nd, but I may have the day off, but not the month of 2015.
2015. All right.
Memorized a lot of things.
And I want to ask you now, switch to Ashley. So about how long after Renee died did Doug meet Ashley?
9 months.
Okay. When did you first meet Ashley?
I met Ashley in the spring of 2017. I believe the date was either March 14th or April 14th.
And did you know about Ashley before you met her?
No, ma'am.
Okay. How did your meeting come about?
I was flying for Southwest Airlines as a captain at the time. They changed my schedule like they do many times in the airline world. And I ended up not overnighting in Baltimore, Maryland, and they sent me to Charleston, South Carolina. Because I was going to Charleston, I texted Doug and said, hey, I'll be in to Charleston tonight. I'd like to have dinner. And he said, great. Text.
You're saying.
Sustained.
Okay. During your conversations, did he mention the name Ashley?
In the second text chain, which is entered,
Object, you're saying.
Sustained.
I'm asking because,
I can answer the question, ma'am.
No, you can't.
When I arrived in Charleston, I texted Doug, and his text to me specifically was,
Object,
you
you're
and
saying.
You can't.
you can't speak about what Doug said to you,
okay,
but during the text messages, did he indicate to you there was a female involved?
yes, that's the first mention of Ashley to me, that we were not going to have dinner at the airport, and that I was to take Uber up to Mount Pleasant to meet them.
Okay. And was that at their house?
That was at Doug's house. Yes, ma'am. 701 Preservation Place.
Doug's house at the time. All right. And how long were you with them, the two of them together?
4 to 5 hours. We started at the house. We ended up going back to my hotel, getting a piece of medical technology, medical device that was a master trainer in that device. We had dinner together at a pizza restaurant across from the hotel,
What kind of?
and then went back to my room in the hotel, the three of us, and certainly 4 to 5 hours that day.
And during this time, did you have multiple conversations with both of them?
We had conversations about everything, especially about how they met,
Okay.
starting at the house, ending at the hotel.
And what did Ashley say about how they met?
She talked about how they met at a political event, a meeting, where Doug and his business investors
Object,
were.
personal knowledge.
Defendant's statement.
Yeah, overruled.
You can go ahead.
Both Ashley and Doug told me about how they met the first night at a political meeting, how Ashley had reached out to him before that meeting. They showed me text messages between them for the 10 days between the first meeting and her second meeting with him up in Charleston, Mount Pleasant. They talked about how they had mutual interests, mutual alignment, how they were looking for the.
This doesn't make sense to me. He's insinuating that she reached out to Doug before they actually met. This doesn't make sense to me. Like she stalked him. She zeroed in on him. As the prosecution said, he had money. He didn't have money. Keep listening.
The same thing in a relationship. They talked about, Ashley talked specifically about her fibromyalgia and pain associated with her ballet dancing days. Ashley talked about her mother, her upbringing.
Fibromyalgia. I identify with that because I have it. And everybody is a little different in all the symptoms that they have. And it can be very, very, very painful. So if she's had to deal with that her entire life, I feel for her. It's not easy.
About her father, about the separation there.
Okay.
You're saying.
Do you have an objection
Yes, sir.
on the basis?
Hearsay.
It's my
defendant's statement.
understanding this is the defendant's statement.
Yes.
All right, overruled.
Okay. Let me stop you there. So she said that her and Doug met at a political event.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And at the time that you were meeting with them, were they married?
Yes, ma'am.
Did Ashley indicate to you when they got married or how long they had been married?
Yes, ma'am. 13 days from first meeting.
That they got married 13 days after they met?
Yes, ma'am.
Did Ashley indicate where they got married?
Yes, ma'am.
And where was that?
That was in Mount Pleasant or Charleston. Doug's best friend at the time, Tripp, married them.
Okay. Did Ashley ever discuss with you that she carried a gun?
Yes.
And what did she say about that?
She said that on their initial meeting, in the political meeting, that she and Doug's traveling partner in business went outside of Secret Service people, and she showed him the gun she was carrying at that event in her bra.
Okay. And she talked to you about this during your meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I want to jump forward a little bit, but did you have any conversations that night about them wanting to have a child? Or was that a different time?
I don't remember us talking about it that first night. No, ma'am.
Okay. Do you remember a conversation with Doug and Ashley, specifically Ashley, about them wanting a child?
I believe it was later in the late spring, the next time that I visited with them.
Okay. And to your knowledge, could Doug have children?
He had a vasectomy after having his daughter with Renee, his longtime wife.
Did Ashley?
I'm sorry, so no, he
Okay.
couldn't have.
Why does he keep saying longtime wife? Every time he mentions her, he says longtime wife. Well, I don't know if it's come out already, but at some point it's going to be mentioned that he'd been married before for like 6 months before Renee. So maybe that's why he defines that as the longtime wife, because that was for like 14 or 15 years. I'm still suspicious of the way she died.
Have children.
Did Ashley speak about that in front of you, Ashley and Doug together, or Ashley separate about the vasectomy?
They did when they were discussing having Doug have a vasectomy reversal. Yes, ma'am, I believe so.
Right. And to your knowledge, did that reversal ultimately go through?
Yes, ma'am, and I believe Ashley actually paid for it on a credit card. They talked about that.
Okay. And ultimately, she became pregnant?
Yes, 3 months after the vasectomy reversal, she became pregnant. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did they end up, I'm going to skip a little bit forward now.
Yes, ma'am.
Did they end up having a wedding reception?
If he supposedly had so much money, why did she pay for the reversal?
They did. I believe it was June of 2017. I was single parenting at the time, and I wasn't able to attend, but it was in Charleston, South Carolina, at the home of one of Doug's business partners.
Okay. You mentioned something about ballet dancing, so I'm going to ask you about that. In your meetings and discussions with Ashley, did she indicate she was interested in the ballet?
She spoke about the fact that she had been a ballet dancer, that she had performed in, I'll call them shows, back, I believe, in Maryland, where she grew up. And by the time that I first met Ashley, they had formed the ballet company called the American National Ballet in Charleston. And they were, at the time that I first met her, they were working on getting that ballet company up and running.
Okay. And was this going to be a large endeavor?
Several $1 million, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Up to 40 dancers were hired. Yes, ma'am, large endeavor.
Okay. And do you know what Doug's role was in that? In your discussions with Ashley, did you find out what Doug's role was?
Yeah, Doug and Ashley talked about it on the first night I met her, about how they founded the ballet, how Doug did the online limited liability corporation work, founded the name, resurrected that name, how they worked together to try to build a ballet that was diverse and open to more than one body size, body shape, body color. That was the philosophy of the ballet as they explained it. That was Ashley's dream.
And how was it funded?
It was funded several ways. A number of Doug's business partner friends, and Doug himself invested money. They had a major, let's say, arts benefactor in Charleston, is a personal injury lawyer who was going to be the primary major donor. In Doug's case, Doug was working on very advanced technologies and patents at the time. And in his case, he didn't have any savings or cash in the bank. So he sold his future stock grants and options to other investors to put his own money in, about $100,000 in his case.
So while this ballet was in development or launching, did Ashley ultimately become pregnant? I know you said she became pregnant several months later, but I'm just trying to get a timeline.
Yes, ma'am. So in February of 2017 are the records and what they told me about founding it. I met her in maybe a month or two after that on that Charleston overnight. They held the first ballet event, and I was invited in May of 2017. Once again, single parent, I wasn't able to attend. She got pregnant in July, and we talked about that multiple times. And the next month in August was the large launch, which me, my business partners, my veteran friends, supporters of Doug all went to Charleston for that major launch in August. It was at a place, I'm sorry.
And at that time, was Ashley pregnant in August?
She was pregnant. I don't remember if she knew or not. It was
Okay.
1 month after the pregnancy was Emerson was conceived.
And at some point, did Ashley move away from the South Carolina home?
Yes, ma'am. We had the August ballet big launch. 2 weeks later, Doug moved Ashley down to Ashley's mother's home in Lakewood Ranch. Drove down one day, dropped her off, and drove back the next day. That's late August.
And what was the understanding, what was Ashley's understanding of why she was moving and what was going on?
In text conversations and personal conversations with Ashley.
Defendant's statement.
It's going to be the defendant's statements.
Can we approach her?
Yes.
Okay. He sure knows a lot.
Okay, so I believe we were talking about the reason that Ashley went to Florida.
Yes, ma'am.
So in your discussions with Ashley, either text or in person or on the telephone, did she indicate to you that she was going to Florida because she was sick? And
That was the initial indication. Yes, ma'am.
She was
and her mother
No.
could better take care of her?
Yes, ma'am.
pregnant, sick.
Thank you.
Quit downplaying everything. Jeez.
Throughout the time that you saw Doug and Ashley together, how did Doug act?
In particular on the opening night and all the way through their relationship. Opening night, totally in love. Both of them in love with each other. Doug was always very respectful. He was very, very respectful with her in front of me.
Yeah.
Both that initial night
In
and
front
then
of
the
you.
next weekend, I believe in May, that I spent down in Sarasota, Bradenton with them. Every time he was respectful of her. They were in love. They never showed anything in front of me other than caring for each other.
That was going to be my next question. So did you see anything other than that?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions.
I guess this was just
Cross.
to get back.
Mr. Taylor, as I've said before, you're free to use the podium if you prefer to cross from table. Yes, sir.
Morning, Mr. Benefield.
Good morning, Mr. Taylor.
You were a naval pilot, correct?
Navy pilot, yes, sir.
I think you mentioned the training that you had briefly, correct?
I went through extensive training all my 30-year career. Yes, sir.
Okay. Some of that training included close quarters combat, did it not?
No, sir. Never.
No hand-to-hand
No, sir.
training at all?
No, sir.
Do you remember having a conversation where you related information about close quarters combat?
Yes, sir. I was in charge. I was the senior.
Do you remember that conversation
Which one, sir? I don't know which one
about
you're
close
speaking
quarters combat?
about. If it was in perspective of me running security and self-defense training for my airline, not the Navy.
You received no such training in the Navy.
No, sir. Never.
Did Doug admit to you firing the gun in the
Objection.
kitchen of their home?
Can we approach?
Yes.
Why are they objecting to that? If the way he said it, did Doug admit it to him? I like this hack. Either J or L.
Mr. Benefield, do you recall that Ashley had left your cousin Doug in the fall of 2017,
Yes, sir.
specifically September 18th of 2017?
Yes, sir. I'm aware of that date and the events.
Do you recall writing to Ashley Benefield in a text in May of 2018, "I'm a fan of
Objection.
yours"?
Hearsay.
It's his.
Yeah, it's his testimony. He's the one that said it. That's not hearsay. Oh, we're going to do this again, aren't we? Somebody doesn't know the meaning of hearsay. I know the meaning of hearsay. And I'm just the snarky juror.
Benefield, following so Mr. Benefield, following Ashley's leaving your cousin Doug in September 18th of 2017, were you a fan of Ashley Benefield's in May of 2018?
I don't remember specifically that word, but it may have been in our lengthy phone calls and text messages from January through June, possibly.
You expressing support for her?
Support for her story of the case, yes, sir.
Yeah. And did you tell her, in fact, at one point, she married the wrong Benefield?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you feel that she married the wrong
Objection.
Benefield?
Relevance.
It's how he felt.
Approach.
It's how he felt. Him personally. How did you feel at the time? This is about as far as I got.
After expressing,
Overruled.
thank you. So, Mr. Benefield, after expressing your support for Miss Benefield in 2018, several months after she left your cousin Doug. By the way, do you know why she left your cousin Doug?
The initial reason or the second reason, sir?
Do you know the reasons that Ashley Benefield gave your cousin Doug as to why she left him?
Objection. Hearsay.
I'm going to need the source. Is this from?
Well, I'm not going to ask
Was it being offered for the truth? I mean,
Yeah, it's not being offered for the truth, and I'm not going to go into the substance. I just want to know if this witness knows.
oh,
You can answer. Did Doug share with you the reasons why she left him?
He shared two different reasons.
Yeah, all right. So now you express several months following that you're a fan of hers. And do you also not say to her that she married the wrong Benefield?
I don't remember that specific text in the 6 months of open communication between she and I.
All right. Let me see if I can refresh your recollection, Mr. Benefield.
Objection.
What? What?
oh,
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
yes.
Can we see what you're showing?
Sure.
Lunch time.
I'm going to show you a document. Why don't you take a moment and look at it and tell us if that refreshes your recollection as to whether or not you suggested to Miss Benefield she'd married the wrong Benefield.
It does not say anything about marrying the wrong Benefield.
Does it say,
Objection.
Hold on. Sir, has that document, without identifying it, we need to lay the predicate.
Mr. Benefield, is that document reflective of the communication that you shared with Miss Benefield?
I believe it's correct and unaltered.
All right. And it's between you and Miss Benefield, is
Yes,
it
sir.
not?
Yes, sir.
All right. And it's accurate, is it not?
I believe so.
Okay. Now, may I approach?
Yes.
Do you say thank you, wrong
Objection.
Benefield?
Yeah, approach, Mr. Taylor. State.
I don't understand what the problem is here. But I don't understand a lot of things in these courts.
Particular. Does the document I've shown you, Mr. Benefield, refresh your recollection of that particular exchange?
Yes, sir.
Now, would you tell us your recollection having been refreshed, whether or not tell us what your response was to Ashley's text?
This is 6 months, and you want me to just focus on
Just tell us
one
what your,
line. Is that
Mr.
what correct,
Benefield,
Mr. Taylor?
just tell us what your response was to Ashley's text, your recollection having been refreshed.
Somebody's dancing. I'm going to say it.
Ashley says in the text,
Mr. Benefield,
Sustain.
please tell us what your response to Miss Benefield's text was now that your recollection has been refreshed.
there are multiple on the page, sir.
Mr. Benefield, I think you know what I'm referring to. Would you please answer my question?
I would like to answer it as it pertains to what she said.
I didn't ask you what she said, Mr. Benefield. I asked you to please tell us your recollection having been refreshed, what you said.
Would you like me to read
And
that
Judge, I would
bubble?
object. We do not need to be reading from this document.
Hold on. Deputy, would you please take the jury into the jury room? If you could give us 5 minutes, I'd appreciate it. Remember, please don't begin your discussions and deliberations amongst yourselves. You can use your phones if you need to contact people, but don't talk about the case with anyone else. And don't do any research on the people, places, things, or legal topics we've heard anything about.
We're going to stay and listen. The witness keeps trying to say things in his way.
All right, y'all can have a seat. The jury's out. Mr. Benefield, I'm going to excuse you to the
He's not answering
hallway.
the question as asked.
You are not to discuss your testimony or the questions that have been asked of you with anyone,
Yes, sir.
including the attorneys.
Yes, sir.
And you're not to let anybody talk to you about anything that's going on inside the courtroom.
Yes, sir.
We're on break.
Yes, sir, I will do that. Should I leave the paper here?
Yes, sir. Leave that there.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
She looks very
When we
comfortable.
began this portion of the discussion, the question was, did you tell Ms. Benefield that she married the wrong person,
The wrong Benefield.
the wrong Benefield? And I sustained that as hearsay with no exception. I found that it didn't provide impeachment of any prior inconsistent statement. What I did allow was him to testify as to his then existing mental, physical, or emotional conditions or feelings, with the question being, did you feel that she had married the wrong Benefield? There was then the attempt to use these text messages that I still have not seen. I don't know what the substance of them was, but where we were was my understanding, and what I heard was the defense was attempting to refresh the witness's recollection.
You are.
And what I have said is it sounded like it started to morph into some mix of impeachment and refreshing recollection and some elements of introducing a past recollection recorded. And that's where we're at. So, state your objection.
My objection, first of all, is the predicate has been laid to refresh recollection. But then the witness has not been asked what his recollection is, other than to read it off of the paper.
No.
Just commingling
No,
past recollection and
he did not
Either
read it off the paper.
past recorded or something of that nature. I think we're commingling the two different things. And if this witness needs to be asked, if it refreshes his recollection, then he can be asked that question without reading the
He
document.
was asked that
I
question.
would object to any reading of the document because it is
He
extrinsic
wasn't asked to
evidence
read it.
being used for impeachment. I do not believe his state of mind is relevant to a material issue in this case. I think the defense is trying to say that it goes to bias, but I'm not quite sure how that fits into it. So my objection would be it's improper refreshing recollection. It's improper impeachment. It's also improper prior recorded recollection, and I would object to that being testified about.
Your response, sir?
Yes. So as succinctly as I can, Your Honor, he's a creep. He acknowledged being a creep, and the jury will conclude he's a creep. It goes directly to his character and his bias. And that's why, after he said Yes, it was accurate. I recall it. He cannot bring himself to say it. And the reason he can't bring himself to say it is because he knows that all these women on the jury are going to know exactly what he was referring to. So I am trying to impugn his credibility after listening to everything that he had to say to set up the state's position about how this relationship was so lovey-dovey between Miss Benefield and Douglas Benefield, and what a wonderful relationship it was. Here, we now have this witness very begrudgingly admitting that after Miss Benefield leaves Douglas Benefield, and she leaves the letter, which I know the court has seen because I attached it as an earlier exhibit to a motion, he's still supporting her. And he's not only supporting her, but he's telling her she married the wrong Benefield. Now, in my world, Your Honor, based upon the rules of evidence, I am entitled to go after his credibility, which he has put in question by virtue of taking the witness stand and becoming a witness. I did it the way the court wanted. I asked the magic question, does this refresh your recollection? He said it did. Now I want him to tell me, in response to my question, did you tell Miss Benefield she married the wrong Benefield? And he cannot bring himself to acknowledge it. He wants to talk about anything else but that. And I think, Your Honor, anything that I'm capable of showing where this witness, Doug Benefield's loving cousin, Tommy Benefield, where this witness showed his support for Ashley Benefield after she left Douglas Benefield, goes directly to his credibility. You can't get up there and testify to all of these things about how wonderful this relationship was, and then on cross-examination have to acknowledge that you were still saying you're a fan of Miss Benefield's after she leaves them, knowing the reasons she left them. I intentionally didn't go into the reasons to try to be straight with the court, but now I'm attempting to impugn his credibility, and he knows it, Judge. He's looking at me like a deer in the headlights.
I'm going to allow you to respond. I previously mentioned about confining arguments to legal and factual bases. I am also going to direct both sides to refrain from vituperative ad hominem attacks.
Vituperative. That's a new
I
word.
don't think we need to resort to name calling. I think it's inappropriate and unprofessional to refer to a witness as a creep. All right. With that said, go ahead for your response.
The first thing, Judge, I don't know if you have the copy of the text message up there. The defense could give it to you. Nowhere in there does it say she married the wrong man. That is not what it said, first of all. And second of all, Tommy Benefield never said that anything about their relationship and the tenor of their relationship once she left. He said, when I saw them together, they looked fine. Just because that changes down the road and he knows they're having problems, I am unaware of how that affects his credibility. He can clearly see that they're having problems later on down the road. I don't see how the timing being different somehow makes him inconsistent.
Was she paying attention at all? At all? Because I heard Tommy say twice that Douglas told him there were two reasons why she left him. And he knows the two reasons. But defense did not ask for the two reasons, going by the boundaries that were presented upon, put upon him. But Douglas told his cousin Tommy there were 2 reasons why she left him. So he does know the reasons why she left him. And that didn't faze him a bit. He was still supporting her. He was taking sides. He was supporting her. But obviously, it was a little creepy how he was doing it. Long conversations with her. Maybe it's a family trait.
Consistent, and somehow that attacks his credibility, or it shows his bias. If Mr. Taylor wants to ask him, were you aware that there were problems after that? Yes, I was aware of that. I mean, in Mr. Taylor's argument, he is impeaching the fact that Tommy Benefield saw them acting loving to each other. If that wants to be impeached or explored, then ask Mr. Benefield if he saw them after that or knew that they were not loving and having that type of relationship.
You weren't listening, were you?
I don't understand the relevance of these types of conversations. I think the defense tends to say everything is about bias, but it has to comport with the rules of evidence. And I would say that this does not.
Well, you're wrong.
All right, thank you both very much. So my ruling earlier was that these statements by Mr. Benefield towards the defendant were hearsay. I wasn't aware of any exception that would allow them. They appear to be offered for the truth of the matter that is asserted. So I didn't allow them on that grounds. What I allowed was the defense to ask, because there had been testimony by Tommy Benefield that they were always respectful to each other. You never saw anything except care for each other, and they were in love both ways. I think it is an impeachable question to ask, did you feel that she married the wrong Benefield? But it's not what he wrote, it's what he felt. That's where you're mixing apples and oranges, the defense is. The question that was presented to me was, did you feel that she married the wrong Benefield? He can answer yes or no. If there's then some extrinsic evidence that may impeach him on that point, I would then have to make a determination is that extrinsic evidence admissible or not? Because if it's a collateral matter that's not material, then the as you well know, Mr. Taylor, you get the answer you get. Where we had an additional part of this analysis was the fact that there was a demonstrated lack of memory, because the answer was, I don't know, as opposed to, no, I didn't say that, or yes, I didn't feel that, yes, I did feel that. So then the path was started on was refreshing recollection. As I've mentioned before, and I mentioned pre-trial, I expect attorneys to know the differences between impeachment by a prior inconsistent statement. That's one path. Refreshing recollection is a second path.
Which is what he did.
And introduction of past recollection recorded, which is a separate path. And the reason I'm sustaining the objection is because it started off with refreshing. Does it refresh your memory? And then we got right back into the documents themselves, which I've already ruled were hearsay. So it's for impeachment purposes only. You can ask him about I allowed you to ask what his feelings were, but not to get into these documents themselves. I don't know how to say it any more clear than that.
So,
if you're refreshing his recollection, then we're going to take that path.
yes, I believe I did that. I believe I refreshed his recollection, and he acknowledged that. So then my question was,
What did you say? And that
Actually-
gets back to the documents. This, if he says his memory is refreshed, you take the document back, or whatever the thing is that you use to refresh recollection is to be retrieved. And then the person testifies from their own personal knowledge.
So once he said that he recalls, I then asked him if he said that you married the wrong Benefield. That's what I said. I will be happy to go through that again, Your Honor. Now, did I leave the document there when I asked him that? Yes. I didn't feel it was necessary to take the document back, but after he acknowledged that his memory was refreshed, I asked him, did you say that she married the wrong Benefield? And that's where we were when Your Honor sent the jury out. He was trying to come to terms with how he was going to answer that.
Ask him if he felt he married the wrong one. Because it doesn't really say that. It insinuates that she's talking to the chief. He'll show it here in a minute.
The other text, Your Honor, is just indicative of continued support for Ms. Benefield.
Because he says, the text says wrong Benefield. It doesn't say you married the wrong Benefield. So he's taking a little bit of liberty here. You hear that?
Sir, this doesn't say what you're asking him.
That approach. Thank you, wrong Benefield. Miss Benefield says, that's very cool. You should be so proud of what you were doing. His response is, thank you, wrong Benefield. What that means, Your Honor, what that suggests is,
Nope.
thank you. You should have been with me.
Sustained.
I assure you, Judge, that any female will draw that conclusion immediately.
That does not match what you're asking, sir.
I
All
agree.
right, are we ready to bring the jury back in? Do you want to treat this as your mid-morning break? You guys can take 5 minutes.
Can I take 5 minutes, please?
All right, am I going to be allowed to get an answer from him?
When we go, I've sustained the objection. All right, so we'll take,
I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify your ruling. It's my understanding that you said he could ask how he felt.
correct. The last objection was the questions were going to, what did you write? What did you say in your text messages? Sustain.
And then, so, okay, thank you.
So we're clear. Did you feel she married the wrong Benefield?
I've already ruled you could ask that question.
All right.
Yeah. I've even got it clear. And I'm not even there.
Anybody outside of the jury or do any research on the people, places, things, or legal topics we've heard anything about? Everybody says no. All right, Mr. Taylor.
That's cool.
Mr. Benefield, when we last were assembled, you were, we were waiting for you to answer the question whether you felt Ashley had married the wrong Benefield.
No, sir, I did not believe that.
Was it a joke?
It was an attempt to keep a communication open between us.
You know, we've established that you were aware that Ashley left Doug in September of 2017.
Yes, sir.
And we've also established that following that, you expressed your support of her.
Yes, sir.
All right, now I want to direct your attention specifically to the month of November of 2017. Were you aware of a domestic violence injunction that Ms. Benefield sought and obtained from South Carolina court?
Yes, sir, at that time.
And did you express to Ms. Benefield
You can ask the question.
your support of her after she obtained that domestic violence injunction?
Sustained.
Did you support Ms. Benefield in November of 2017 following the issuance of a domestic violence injunction?
Not specifically about that, sir.
Do you recall
Splitting hairs.
expressing your support on Saturday, November 4th, 2017?
I don't remember that specifically, sir.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Benefield, I'm going to show you a document, see if this refreshes your recollection.
Tries to get rid of one, another one's working. This is all new to me. We're into new territory.
The areas that I checked refresh your recollection.
Yes, sir, those appear to be my statements.
All right, your recollection having been refreshed, Mr. Benefield, on November 4th, following the issuance of the domestic violence injunction to Ms. Benefield, did you express your support to her?
There are two problems with your question for me, sir. I'm going to ask you,
Would you answer my question, and then you can certainly feel free to explain it?
I was unaware of I believe I was unaware of any result of any pending case in South Carolina at the time I texted that.
I thought you just told us you were aware.
I became aware after the fact when the mutual protection order was entered. I found out about it after the fact, but I don't remember the date of that event as it relates to the November 4th.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
State, any redirect?
No.
Can this witness be released?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor, can this witness be released from his subpoena?
Yes, sir.
Sir, you are released from your subpoena. The prior restrictions that I placed upon you are removed.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
State, call your next witness.
State calls Eva Benefield.
Oops. Another Benefield. Yay. Gotta go get her. Oh, is this the...
You saw this for the testimony about
Is this your stepdaughter?
Good morning, ma'am. My name is Judge White. I'm presiding over the case. Just make yourself comfortable in that chair. Get about 12 to 15 inches from the microphone. It does adjust up, down, left, and right as you need it. Actually, you're just fine right there. I think that's close enough.
Okay.
Speak in a loud, clear voice, and we'll hear everything. Go ahead.
Please state your name.
Eva Benefield,
How do you spell your first name?
EVA,
And how old are you now?
23.
What was your relationship to Doug Benefield?
He was my father.
And who was your mother?
Renee Benefield.
And we heard from the previous witness, she died, unfortunately, at some time before this case, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. When did you first find out about someone named Ashley Benefield?
It was August of 2016, about 9 months after my mom passed.
Okay. And how did you find out about her?
My dad was on the phone when he picked me up from school, and he had his phone on speaker, and they mentioned him having a girlfriend, and if he was going to bring his girlfriend to a conference that they had that weekend.
And was that the first time you had any information that there might have been a girlfriend?
Yes.
Okay. How old were you at the time?
I was 15.
At the time, were you upset with him about that?
No, I just told him that I trusted him, and if that's what made him happy, that I would be happy for him.
And about how long after that did you find out they were married?
It was 2 days after.
And how did you find out that they were married?
My dad came up into my room, and he said, "Eva, we need to have a chat downstairs with Ashley." She was at the house at the time, and I said, I don't think we need to. I understand that you're dating her and you're happy, but please just, give me my space a little bit. I don't want to have a conversation." And he said, "No, I think it's really important we do." And I said, "The only time that I would want to have a conversation with y'all is if you told me that you were going to propose." And when those words came out of my mouth, he told me that they were married.
Okay. So that's how you found out they were married.
Yes.
Did Ashley eventually move into your house?
Yes.
And that was the house in South Carolina?
Yes, ma'am.
At the time, who all lived in the house? Just the three of you?
Yes.
How was their relationship together that you saw?
They were just with each other all the time. It was very lovey-dovey. They were very touchy-feely, PDA. Any event with school or extracurricular that I was in, they were together. They'd go grocery shopping together, go travel together. They never left each other's side.
Okay. And how did you and Ashley get along?
It was friendly at first.
Okay. You said it first.
Yes.
And then what happened?
Over time, she tried to reprimand me a little bit more and kind of step into a motherly role. And I did not like that because it was so short after my mom passed away.
Okay.
Relevance.
Sustained.
And in Ashley's interactions with you, or interactions that she had or disagreements that she had with your father, how did you observe her to act?
Can you repeat the question?
I'm sorry, it wasn't a good question. Whenever she had a disagreement with you, how would she act?
It was almost temper tantrum like. It was
Objection. Impermissible character evidence.
I'm sorry.
Character evidence.
Overruled.
Okay, so it was temper tantrum like, and you didn't sound like you were finished. What were you saying?
she would go directly to my dad and tell him that I wasn't obeying.
Okay. And did her reactions to you seem to be on the level of the situation, or did she get more angry at the situation?
Usually they were overreactions over small things.
Okay. And how about interactions with your dad? Did you ever hear her argue with your father?
I heard her strongly voice her opinions over and over and over again.
Okay. Now, you said over and over and over again. Is that something that you heard on a regular basis or something you only heard once?
It was on a regular basis.
Okay. And when she was voicing her opinions to your father, was he ever reacting to that?
No, he would just sit quietly and listen.
Did you ever see them
Stu,
fight,
No,
verbally fight?
no,
Okay. Did you ever see them physically fight?
no.
excuse me.
How often would you say that Ashley and your father would disagree within your hearing?
Never.
Okay. You said if Ashley was trying to get her point across that she would go on and on about that?
Yes.
Okay, so you don't term that as a disagreement?
No.
Okay. And what would you term that as?
My dad just listened to her voice her concerns.
Okay. Did you ever hear your dad at any time yell at her?
No.
Did you ever hear your dad do something or say something that was controlling to her?
No.
Did you ever see or hear your dad threaten her?
Objection, leading.
Overruled.
Did you ever see or hear your dad threaten her?
No.
Did you ever see or hear your dad get physical with her?
No.
No further questions.
Cross.
What's the point of putting her up there?
Yes.
She's a sweet kid. We never saw the real side
Good
of
morning,
her.
Ms. Benefield.
Good morning.
We met previously at a deposition, correct?
Correct.
And I apologize to you for meeting you under these circumstances. I'm required to ask you a few questions based on the testimony that you've given us. You
She doesn't-
lived in the house at the time that Ashley and your father were first married.
Yes.
And you found out from your father that he had married Ashley when he introduced her to you.
It wasn't when I was first introduced. It was a day after.
So the day after, you said?
Yes.
Okay. So your mother had passed away approximately 8 months earlier,
9 months.
9 months earlier. And your father, with no advance knowledge, came and introduced you to his new wife.
Yes.
There was a hole in the ceiling of the kitchen in your home, correct?
Correct.
You know what that hole was, how it got there?
Objection. Calls for hearsay.
I don't know if it will or not.
I would prefer the question not be asked.
Of course you would.
Okay.
Can we approach?
Yes.
Oh, we can't have this in evidence. She was a wit. Do you know? Do you know how the hole in the ceiling got there? Nothing wrong with that question. They just don't want to hear the answer. This works so much better for me. I can get there.
So I think the question that was pending, Ms. Benefield, was, did you know how?
Objection, Judge.
Sustained.
Let me back up. You told us there was a hole in the ceiling of your kitchen.
Yes.
Was that hole in the ceiling of your kitchen, can you describe it?
It was small.
Small, kind of round?
Yes.
Consistent with an object?
Objection, speculation.
Let me finish the question.
Consistent with an object the size of a bullet?
Yes.
Overruled.
Were there holes in the drywall of your home?
There was one.
Was it from the closet
No.
outside to the drywall?
No.
Where was
It was near the kitchen.
it? Did you know how it got there?
Yes.
Was the hole consistent with the size of a fist?
Yes.
Was that hole patched?
Eventually,
Who patched it?
my father.
I think she's torn.
Did you know that your father studied close quarters defense in the Navy?
Yes.
And tell us what close quarters defense comprises.
I'll allow it briefly so she can explain the basis of her knowledge.
Yeah.
Well, let me give the court a little better insight into this. Miss Benefield, do you hold a black belt?
Yes.
Whoa.
And are you trained in defensive combat fighting?
Taekwondo.
Did you and your father often discuss different styles of defensive fighting?
We had the conversations when I was practicing, when I was
Okay.
10.
And tell us were you trained in close quarters defense?
Yes.
All right. Tell us what it entails.
In hand-to-hand combat.
Okay. And it's the type of hand-to-hand combat where if confronted by a weapon, rather than turning to run, you're trained as to how to remove the weapon from the other person's hands.
Well, you're told to first ask for no conflict, and then if they proceed, yes.
Yeah. In other words, your objective is to take the weapon away.
If there's a weapon involved, yes.
She's trying to figure out why he's asking this question.
Were you aware that a domestic violence injunction had been issued by the court in South Carolina?
No.
Give me 1 second, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
She's a sweetheart. I feel sorry for her that she's caught in between all this stuff. She never saw the side of her dad that Ashley did, is my opinion.
One last question, Ms. Benefield. Was your dad fixated with Ashley?
I think they were fixated with each other.
Did you make a prior state? Whoops. Did you express at any time that your dad, your words, not mine, was fixated with Ashley?
I might have.
Give me just a moment, Judge.
Some people are calling this the Black Swan case.
Do you remember having your deposition taken?
Yes.
Proper impeachment objection.
I need page and line,
Um,
and I don't have a copy of it.
Yeah, I was just first asking her the question. Do you remember sitting for a deposition?
Yes.
Let me pass to you this document and see if it refreshes your recollection.
Approach.
Oh, come on. He's doing it properly. Gosh. Damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. I wonder if she looks like her mom. Ava.
The
Eva.
word that you had used to refer to your dad's interest in Ashley was what?
When are you referencing?
In general. Was the word fixated? Was that the word you used?
Yes.
Okay.
That's all.
Right, redirect.
No, thank you.
All right, can this witness be released?
No.
Yeah.
Or- Okay, yes, but no, so you know. All right, Ms. Benefield, you've not been released from your subpoena, all right? And the rule of sequestration has been invoked. What that means is that you can't be in the courtroom anytime that there's testimony being given or evidence being presented. Because this is being shown on TV or the internet or something, you can't watch it outside of court. You can't watch what's going on inside of court. You can't be inside of court. You also may not discuss your testimony with any of the witnesses or any of the attorneys. Better practices don't talk about with anybody else. And none of the other witnesses nor the attorneys can talk with you about what's going on in court. Do you understand all of that?
Yes, sir.
All right. And again, you're not released from your subpoena, so you need to remain available.
Okay.
All right. But for now, you're excused.
Why? She should be released. That's my opinion. She should be released. Goodness.
It's right about lunchtime, so let's go ahead and take our lunch break. It's just a couple of minutes before 12. In order to give you time to go and find what you want and everything, I'm going to ask you to be back in that jury assembly room downstairs at about 1:10. All right, so it'll give you about an hour and 10 minutes if you want to go somewhere. Certainly, there's plenty of places. If you haven't been in downtown Bradenton for a while, there's plenty of places up and down Main Street, 12th Street, all the way down to the water. There's some places on 13th, also some places a little bit south. Please leave your notes here. Do not discuss the case with anyone else outside of the jury or amongst yourselves. Please don't do any research on the people, places, things, or legal topics we've heard anything about. Remember also, it's kind of a small town. Sometimes it happens where jurors are sitting in one booth and somebody on the other side of that booth you hear talking about the case, or you heard names that sound familiar or things that sound familiar. Remember, they may not know you're there. Just, hey,
Excuse
I'm
me.
on the jury. I need you to stop. If they don't, I need you to report it to the deputies as soon as you get back. All right, you're free to go.
Okay. Mr. Castillo? Yes. We'll let it go to the
All right, have a seat. Before I let you all go, State, you had just mentioned that despite Eva Benefield not being released, you want her to remain in the courtroom.
Yes, pursuant to Marcy's law and pursuant to the earlier discussion.
All right, did you want to be heard?
That doesn't make any sense. You do some kind of. You just got done telling her.
No.
Okay, then she'll be allowed to remain in the courtroom as the next of kin.
Okay, thank you.
All right, same with you all. I don't foresee, I mean, you said you exchanged witness lists, so You know who's going to be coming in the afternoon. Are there any that, because this morning we had talked about 4 different people, so 2 have testified. Whenever we get back, if there's any particular issues about any folks in the afternoon, let me know.
Okay.
All right?
And we're behind, so I'm not sure exactly when those other people will be coming up, so.
All right. We'll see you guys back here at 1:10.
Thank you. And we anticipate the jury coming back in at 1:15.
Correct, exactly.
Are we going to the seal? Let me see. Let me see the seal. Hey, there's the seal. We'll see that in a minute, up close and personal. I don't know if she's got any brothers. And she's allowed to have friends. This happened, what, 2 years ago? Some such thing. Okay. Well, that's the morning of day 1. You heard the opening statements, and you had heard from the cousin, and you heard from the daughter of a previous relationship of the decedent. He's not the victim. And that was very interesting that the daughter is a black belt in Taekwondo and knows all about close quarters defense, which is what those movements were when she fired at him, when Ashley fired at Doug because he wouldn't back off. He was going to take that gun away from her. And who the hell knows what he would have done. She was in fear of her life. Period. So we'll leave that here for now. And we will be back for the afternoon. At least I will be. I hope you will be too. So we will see you then. We'll see you then. Yeah, and God bless.